So today I am here with Justin, and before I head into telling you all about who Justin is, I want to tell you the story about how we actually met in the first place because it couldn't have felt more divinely guided than anything else. So if you go back into my video library, you will see that I did an amazing interview with Rio Allen. Rio Allen is an amazing healer, a facilitator, and somebody who focuses particularly in supporting homos or gays like ourselves. I believe Justin has been to some of his workshops, and that's where they're met. Justin saw my interview with Rio, and then I received this random email from this dude from America who was like, "Hey, Tor, I'm going to be in London during these dates. Do you want to come and meet for a coffee?" And I was like, this is weird, but sure, I'll come, take a risk. Um, when we met, we hit it off, gave each other a reading. I took some risks during those readings about my future, which I thought was quite exciting. And as we were there, we were like, we should make some content together focusing on the tarot, focusing on being gay, and perhaps also some other interesting topics that others might not be covering. So just wanted to open with that because I think it's such a interesting story. And also, it's just the beauty of creating interesting content online and the types of interesting connections that can lead to if you do that. So, Justin, over to you. Who are you, and what are your sort of more esoteric interests, and where does that come from?
A great question. Who am I is a question I'm still trying to answer. I'm being cheeky actually saying that. Um, but it is amazing how, you and I met or how any two people ever come together. And I wouldn't have known about Rio, who I first learned about maybe 3 or 4 years ago through the Spiritual Gaze and their podcast, which they have
Ah,
an extensive library that people can still find. I know that they don't do the podcast anymore, but again, that's how
ah.
I kind of got into tarot as well, studying with Brandon and Angel who run that. And synchronistically, I am using their mug today, which I didn't even think about till this moment,
Is
which is
this
very, very
is
cool.
this what they call the gay mafia?
Yes, yeah, yeah. We're
Gay
global
spirit,
now.
the gay spiritual mafia, obviously.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. 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 We kill you with
That's
kindness. So there you go. Yeah.
That's so interesting that, oh yeah, I remember you said that. That's how you met Rio by li or found out about Rio by listening to the spiritual gaze. I love that. And one of the things which I really, and I said this to you before, like one of the things that I really appreciate about Rio is the types of content where he talks about that actually, being gay or being a homo is actually a gift, right?
Yeah.
Because, even in society today, there is still loads of shame and guilt and judgment around people's sexuality and gender orientation. And so, it's so lovely to see that somebody is creating a different story around what it means to be gay, because I do think that will have a real impact about just on ourselves, but also like young people growing up today. When I was researching other sort of spiritual gay content creators on YouTube, I mean, the content is awful. Although, at least in the beginning, now the algorithm has begun to understand that I'm gay, and now it's sort of sending me better gay spiritual content. But in the beginning, it was like, it was only hateful content coming from a more religious background towards LGBTQI plus people. Gotta get the whole alphabet in there, gotta be inclusive. Um, so that's really interesting. You are interested in the tarot. I also know that you have an interested in interesting Kabbalah, right? And Jungian archetypes. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my day job, if you will, and night job, it's 24 hours really, is I run a production company and development company that works in film and what we used to call television. So
Mm.
storytelling is a big part of who I am and always has been. And I'm able and fortunate enough to be able to do that as a career. And I teach writers in particular And not unrelated, but actually completely related to that is the study of Jungian psychology, of Kabbalah, of
Ah.
Jungian archetypes, and tarot. In fact, I'm developing a course. Most of it is developed. I just haven't run it yet. That incorporates what Joseph Campbell would call the hero's journey, but using the major arcana of the tarot to follow a similar trajectory for a character, because that's part of our lives as human beings, as individuals, as you very well know, Tor. So to put all of those things together in what might be a somewhat unique magical package is exciting to me. And that's a part of what's exciting about what you and I are doing today. We have a loose idea, and yet neither of us know fully what will come of it, just like we didn't know what would happen when we met for coffee, but we both had that inclination to say yes to it and see what happened. Just like I did when I reached out to Rio years ago. It's that we could go on with countless examples of that from our own lives, which is really just beautiful. Um,
Hmm. So, remind me and correct me if I'm wrong. I have learned Joseph Campbell's hero's journey because I went to media school.
right.
There is a place in their journey where there's a crisis, right? There's a crisis of self and crisis of identity. Which one of the major arcana cards in your course represents that sort of part of the hero's journey?
I think it's those cards that probably start with the hanged one, the hanged man, and continue through the tower. I think that's the key point. Up until then, you're really learning who you are, and if it's the hero, whether we're talking about you or me, or we're doing a reading, or we're talking about a character in a story, it's a buildup of discovery until that moment of, dare we say, crisis, or that the character or the person is challenged now by what that means. It's almost like the question from the universe or through an antagonist, if it's a story, is are you serious about this? Or are you going to run
Mm,
back to who you used to be? That's why, like Star Wars, especially the original, resonates so deeply, is George Lucas in that case really took the hold of, the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, which mirrors ours. And it's
mm,
that question when Luke Skywalker comes back and sees that his aunt and uncle had been killed by the stormtroopers. Is he going to stay and bury them and try to keep the moisture farm going? Or is he going to go to space and take a chance and discover more about who he is with this crazy, mentor of sorts, Obi-Wan Kenobi? And we might not have that dramatic of a moment. Hopefully we don't, where there's literal death, etc. But there can be and often is a metaphorical death that presents that question to us: who are we going to be now?
when in your life, either recently or further back, would you say that that's been a moment in your life? I went straight into the depths there, and I'll tell my moment afterwards. From what you just shared, like what resonates with you?
There certainly have been many. One of the key moments in my life came when I was around 17. I was going to a very strict, shall we say, religious church of a
Mm,
certain denomination that I won't mention, but rhymes with Istianity. Um, and I was very much involved in that church. I went to a private school that was based on that religious belief, etc. So it was all embodied in me. And at 17, to make a long story short, a dear friend of mine who was actually the theater director of a community theater that I had recently joined and been part of, which really opened me up emotionally. And I would say now, looking back spiritually as well, because I was
mm,
exposed to people and things I wouldn't have been in my rather sheltered life before. But he was married to a black woman. He was Caucasian. He was white. And that never seemed to be an issue, nor should it have been. And yet I got a call from him on a Saturday, and he said, Justin, I'm not going to be going to the church anymore. We feel very oppressed by the looks and some of the comments that we're
mm,
getting by some of the members of the church. Again, a group that's supposed to be encompassing and loving and all of those things, but they're human, so they're flawed.
mm.
And that struck me so deeply, and I wanted to do something about that. And so that next Sunday, that very next day, I asked to speak in front of the congregation, and they didn't know what I was going to say. And I basically called everyone, including myself, if I'm guilty of any of that, out. And it caused a major uproar in the church, and it caused a split of sorts in my own life to go, I can't go back to that, but
Mm,
I don't know what that means.
mm,
Um, and that really was a major turning point for me. And I will say, too, at that point, I wouldn't have realized, even I could have passed a lie detector test, that I was not a homosexual, even though, of course, I was.
mm.
But I really, truly didn't know that about myself at that point, which is appropriate since that's a part of, why we're here and what we're here to talk about. So that was a key moment, and that was the first one that came to mind.
Wow, that is so much more powerful than my story is going to seem like nothing is
No,
compared. I mean, that is such an incredibly powerful thing to do also at that age. I mean, it's, taking a stand and just going, excuse me, this isn't right. I mean, that takes just incredible inner strength to be able to do that.
I suppose, I was one of those, teenagers at that time that was probably more like 55. And
Mm,
so the next 10 years, I had to sort of catch up to myself in other ways. But
mm.
so and I'm fortunate, I suppose, to have had things in my life much prior to that, even from birth, where that inner strength either had to be there or I would have disintegrated. So
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, I was going to tell, because actually it's this month, I think, 3 years ago, where I started working full time as a practitioner. I was working part time in this corporate role, and I was made redundant with a third of the company. Basically, had 6 months of savings, and I was like, screw it. I'm either going to do it now, or this is never going to happen. And then I decided to jump into the ocean and start swimming without any specific direction. I mean, I don't think I still have a specific direction. I have a sense where I'm being guided, but who knows? The ocean, I'm still swimming out onto the open ocean. There's been no islands just yet, I don't think. But I think that's sort of the moment, at least 2 years ago in recent memory, where I had to go, will I just get another corporate job, which would have been fine. There's nothing wrong with having a corporate job, or am I going to like step out into the depths of the ocean and see what happens? I think another one was, for example, when I moved to London, right, and I stepped out of the comfort of my home, and I think, yeah, it was like the moment where am I going to remain and just stay that way like the rest of everybody around me, or am I going to take a stand and go, that life is not going to work for me and I need to step out of it, and I can only step out of it by moving across the pond, basically. So yeah, there's been a couple of moments where I had to take a stand and step out of my comfort zone.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I will politely and lovingly correct you. You didn't have to, you did. And it's so great to hear that story because we all can relate to that.
Mm,
We might not have moved countries. We might not have left the known for the complete unknown, the ocean, as you called it. But in our own way, we have, right? Each of us. If
mm,
we were to interview 100 people, they'd all have a story about that. And
mm,
whether they did it or not is also really fascinating. And, we are both, of course, here to encourage anyone who's watching this. If you're at that proverbial crossroads right now, go with what intuitively you're feeling,
mm,
trust that more than logic, take into account things that you have to be accountable and responsible for. Yes. At the same time, no one's going to do that for you. No one's going to push you intuitively. The universe whispers and taps us, spirit taps us and whispers, but it's up to us to have the courage to say yes, which is one thing
mm,
that I really love about the tarot is it's so practical. We don't have
mm.
to do whatever it's advising, for example, but it shows us that there is that opportunity, right?
It definitely shows us that. And before we move into the tarot, because you mentioned intuition there, which of course
Yeah.
you and I both think is an important part of working with the tarot. How have you connected with your intuition? Because that is a question that comes up so often with my clients. They're like, oh, I feel like my intuition is all over the place. I don't feel like I can trust it. It doesn't feel like it's guiding me anywhere. Yeah, what does intuition feel like to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and we could probably just do an hour on that.
Mm,
Um, I mean, in part, I think we're all figuring that out. The caveat, though, to that, and what I would say concretely is when we, because I'll identify with the clients that you mentioned, say, my intuition's all over the place. I can't hear what is, what it's really saying, or the equivalent of something like that. It isn't your intuition that's out of order. It's the mind and safety and security that's stopping you from going to that place that does not seem secure. Um,
mm,
it's really the depiction of what the Fool card is all about. And as humans, the mind in particular wants us to have what we think of as control. But the truth is we never really have control. You and I
mm,
were talking before we got online about something that's very difficult, a passing of some people that you knew. We don't
mm,
have control over that. When
mm,
they, in that example, got up yesterday or this morning or what have you, they had no idea that was what the day was going to bring. Um,
mm,
and there's positive, things that happen as well. I didn't know the day that I saw the video with you in Rio that then I would be meeting you a month later or whatever it was, right?
mm,
But we want to think that we have that stability and control. And the truth is, in a lot of ways, there are things we can control, yes, our actions and our attitude and our response, but the rest we don't.
mm,
And so intuition is deeper than that. And the key to know what is intuitive and what is some mix of your brain and or maybe ego sometimes, or your, a want versus an actual need or a longing, what have you, is to get as quiet as possible because that's when intuition kicks in. And I think
mm,
the more that I'm able to do that in things, and I've failed, of course, a million times, I probably will today, to not listen to that. But it's always present if we can be quiet
mm,
and still enough to really hear it. And sometimes it comes as a feeling, like we call it a gut feeling a lot of times, because that seems to be where it originates from. I've had it show up, and I'm sure you have too, in my like heart space where it almost feels like something grabbing me. And sometimes I don't even process it. Like reaching out to you is one of those things that was intuitive. It's like, oh, I'm going
mm,
to London. He's in London. Let's see. If I would have
mm.
thought about it, I would have come up with 10 reasons not to, probably, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head when it's about getting quiet, because that is, I mean, of course, you're sort of, there might be stuff that's going on with a person which might make it feel difficult to get quiet, but it is a practice of quietness, right? And
Yeah,
creating that inner stability. And because that's the thing, it's like there's so much instability outside of ourselves. We have to create that stability within ourselves. And through creating that quietness and stability within ourselves, we will over time, hopefully, hear the whisper of our intuition. You brought up the Fool card, which is probably actually one of my favorite tarot cards. I don't know, there's something about that card which I just find so interesting and powerful. And even like the story I told you about the 3 years ago when I sort of decided that new journey, the Fool kept on coming up all the
sure.
time, basically. And I think, as you know, the change card and I've been going through some change. The change card that's been showing up now is the wheel, right? Which is still a change card, just in a different. How would, interesting enough. Okay, let's start delving a tiny bit into the tarot, and then we are going to ask some of the questions. How would you do? What is the difference between a change of the fool and a change of the wheel? How does that feel different to you?
Well, that's really good. I like that. I think they can certainly work together, but separately, the fool to me is, and I love, Pamela Coleman Smith's depiction in particular. There's others that are great. I'm just going to use hers, but it's the, character on the edge of a cliff. They're looking up. We don't see what the next step for them is. Are they going to land on a ledge that's not in the card? Are they going to fall for a while? Maybe catch themselves, maybe not. We don't know.
Mm,
The wheel is more stable, I think, in a sense, where it is constantly turning. And one thing that always stands out to me about the wheel, of fortune is that that's what it's called. It's not the wheel of misfortune, right? It is the wheel of
Mm,
fortune. And to me, the wheel is more about staying in the center of that space as things swirl around you to find that stillness, to let that fortunate opportunity or moment or what seems like a misfortune that will turn into fortune happen. There's more of
mm,
a passivity, I think, with the Wheel of Fortune than there is with the Fool, which is to me more action based, where you have to take that step. And the minute you do, you turn into the magician, where everything that's available is available to you that's there as a picture in the tarot, whether that's the energy of passion and fire and the wands, or we could go on and talk about the rest of them. But that I think is the key distinction, at least as I'm answering off the cuff and from the heart in this moment.
yeah, and I think, yeah, I think that's really well put. And I think also the thing with the Fool, to me at least, it seems like a very, like a 180 degree. This is a new beginning, like you're stepping really out into the unknown, whilst the wheel seems like it's sort of it's change, but within
Mhm.
a certain boundary almost. Like it's not
Yeah.
so large, basically. It's not like, yeah, it's much more change around where you already are. It's just some things might be shuffled around to create that wheel of fortune, basically, rather than the step into the entire unknown, which is often what the fool can represent.
Yeah, and it's
So,
also interesting in the arcana, major arcana, where the wheel comes. Obviously, the Fool is card zero. It's present in all of the major arcana and it kicks off the majors. Whereas the Wheel of Fortune is card 10 and it's in between in most decks, the Hermit and Justice. So that's fascinating, I think, and important to at least comment on as well.
mm, so it's between justice and judge
The
and
Hermit.
hermit.
Mhm.
I always find justice an interesting card because sometimes it's, I mean, of course, it kind of depends on the situation,
Right.
but it is sometimes a difficult, I find it a challenge sometimes to draw out an interpretation or a feeling of the energy of the card. It's not as obvious as many of the others, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. I think it depends, as you said wisely, on
Mm,
the question or what is being asked.
mm,
But it is fascinating, and obviously you know this, where it has both the sword of, shall we say, truth,
mm.
and also the scales for balance. And
Yeah.
we see the sword almost in the same way in the King of Swords, and we certainly see the scales in the Six of Pentacles. And that's interesting as well, that they merge together to form this image of justice, which of course is, and it's
Ah.
also interesting, at least in the Pamela Coleman Smith rendering, that justice is not blind, whereas in the at least American justice system, often justice is depicted with the blindfold and the scale and the sword.
Ah, yeah, no, it's not like that. It's not blind on my deck. It is definitely
Right.
not blind on my deck. I can't
And I
obviously
think
not
that's
find.
significant.
Ah, that is, I think that is significant. Oh, that's interesting. So the first question that I thought we were going to ask the tarot, and if you haven't catch it already, we are gay. So are we
Proud,
identify
proud gay man. Yes.
proud gay men? I suppose it's useful that we are uh, recording this also during Pride Month, you know?
Yes.
When is Pride where you are? When
So
is there
traditionally,
a
of course,
parade? Is there a parade where you are?
yeah. So I live in Las Vegas, for everyone's knowledge. And Las Vegas, we hold Pride in October. And
Oh.
main reason is because it's so darn hot that people standing out in 100 plus degree Fahrenheit for a parade isn't going to
Ah.
happen. That's part of the reason. And the other part might be commercial too, because it takes place kind of after the bigger prides around the America, but then around the world as well. So there's
Mm.
practical and potentially maybe some financial reasons too.
Ah, right. That makes sense. Yeah, because it's Pride Month here in London right now. I've been invited to walk in the parade this year, which I've only done once in my life in London. And it was so hot, I thought I was gonna crash by the end of it
Right.
because it was one of those hot days in London. I think I'm gonna try and do it again this year, just because it's fun. It's like
Yeah.
it's just I have a very serious part of my personality, and so sometimes I also just have to be silly, and it's kind of fun. So the first question that we were going to ask the we're going to ask the tarot, and obviously this is like an open-ended, energetic question. And we're going to ask the tarot what it thinks about us being gay. Like, we are asking the tarot, is it okay to be gay? And you're going to pull two cards, and I'm going to pull two cards.
Okay. Can I involve you in my poll?
In what sense?
So I'm going to just flip the cards without looking, and you're going to intuitively tell me when to stop.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So
I was
I'm
about
going to
like,
start.
I thought you were going to be like, is it okay that Tor is gay? This is more like a collective gayness.
No, no, no. This is collective. Yeah, 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 yeah. Although it obviously affects both of us, but
Yeah, no,
guarantee
no.
before we do this, because this is live, we haven't done this before in advance. Whatever cards come up are right, and we
These are
will.
this is happening. This is happening all live. This is not planned.
No.
We've even had some bumps in the road during this recording, so it's all happening live basically. I
Yeah.
have pulled two cards. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to start flipping and just intuitively tell me when to stop. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
All right. Stop.
Okay, so that's card one. All right. So card two, tell me when to stop.
All right. Stop.
Great.
We
And
were
that's
laughing.
important.
Go on.
That's important too because that second card didn't want to leave my hand. And
Whew.
whenever that happens, it almost has like a special resonance. That's the way I like to look at it. So,
Before we came on, we were laughing about if either one of us pulled the devil,
hmm.
and what that would mean. But it's like you said. What did you say again? I think it's your right to tell the story because you were the one who brought it up.
Oh, sure. So, like, if the devil card comes up, which it could, we don't know. I haven't flipped the cards over. Uh, that is how a lot of the world looks at being gay.
Mm,
Looks at being trans, looks at being queer, whatever letter of the alphabet we're looking at. Um, and that would be fascinating, I think, to talk about if it does. It doesn't mean
mm.
that's what the tarot thinks per se, but it's the tarot reflecting, dare we say, a majority, unfortunately, of people still, or at
And you've
least what used to be the majority.
and you've touched on something there which is really interesting, which really often happens during my readings. And there's this woman on Instagram. She's like a therapist that I really like, and she said something such as, "Most people don't lack clarity; they lack courage."
Ooh, yeah, that's so right.
Ooh, I think it's so right. And what I often find with my readings, and I'm sure you do too, is that actually, when people come to me for a reading and they ask, should I start this business, for example, the tarot will most often reflect back to what they've already decided that they're going to do, and it's like a confirmation. And the thing with the devil is that it's a reflection of what's already happening in society. It's not the tarot saying, no, it's bad to be gay. It's the energy of what's happening, basically. Um, I'm going to let you, because I'm such an attention-seeking Leo that I'm going to let you do it first.
How kind of you to put that Leo aside. So the first card we got is the Four of Pentacles.
Hmm.
I love that.
What does that mean to you?
So the first thing, and I wouldn't normally look necessarily at the Four of Pentacles like this, but the thing that stands out with this question is they have their back to the city.
Oh yeah.
And to me, that's saying, at least in part, in this way, that being gay is you are set apart to a degree. It
Yeah.
isn't what everybody else necessarily is doing, or at least again, we'll use the word majority. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it is something that encompasses all of you, the head, the heart, and the grounding, the foundation of who you are. And they
Mm.
have their, arms wrapped around the heart space. And Pentacles are earth, right? And it's very practical. It's also money
Mm.
and wealth. And fours are a number of stability. And so there's a security deep down in being gay, despite what we might say the city or the world might think of it. So to me, that's really beautiful and fascinating. I wouldn't have intellectually thought of that card, but then spiritually that those
That
things
makes
come up. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And also, it's that phrase by Brené Brown, which is something about having the not confidence, but being able to stand, having the strength to stand alone in the wilderness or
Mm.
something of that manner. And it kind of reminds me of that, basically, is that, it's like you said, the four, stability, the person in the picture has their back to the city, which means they've stepped out of the city, and yet they still feel stable and secure in
Yeah.
themselves. And I suppose, if we look at the tarot and the energy of that collectively, would you say that the tarot is perhaps saying something such as there is still, looking at it, looking through the a lens of like growth and learning, is that for people, and of course we use the phrase gay, but we are of course including everybody else in the alphabet when it comes to this, and it's about there's still perhaps some work to be done to treasuring and grounding ourselves in ourselves and our own identity and trusting that that is right for the path that we're on right now.
That's exactly right. And that's the work that we were talking about, like Rio does, the work that
Yeah,
you're doing with this platform, and a number
yeah.
of others, thankfully, as well. Um, and it really does encompass all those areas, the head, spirit, right? Not just the intellect, but what encompasses us beyond the physical body, the heart space, really
Mm,
treasuring that, your emotional center, and then that foundation as well. And
mm,
I'll be 50 in a couple of years. I'm closer to that by far than 20. And the only reason I mention that is 21, 22 is when I came out, if that's the phrase we want to use.
mhm,
And it's been a journey since to discover what that means and also to continue to cleanse some of those things from the past, some of those programs or messages that I grew up with. And I'm not blaming my parents or even the church for those things. I took them in. It was part of my journey, my hero's journey, if you will. And I'm glad for them because they have served as a foundation, and yet they're not applicable to me now. And it is having that courage to step into, wow, I didn't know that was still present, and decide what that means, for
mm,
myself. Not on a daily basis anymore, but at a certain time, it certainly was.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. So, for any of you gays and queers and theys and the rest, do that. It's really important, and the tarot thinks so too, that you embark on that journey towards inner stability. And even though that person on that card is standing by themselves, it's not necessarily mean that you need to be doing this by yourself, but
Right.
it's still important to have that sense of self and grounding in your sense of self all by yourself. So it's an interesting sort of dichotomy there of like you need to do some of the work. It's like that hermit energy almost a tiny bit, but you can still have support. So it's like finding the balance between the two of those, I think.
Well, I say this to people if they come and they're asking, about them as a couple. It's
Mm,
like, yes, we could look at a reading as the two of them and that partnership, or if there's more than two of them. But ultimately, you go to bed alone in the sense that you wake up in your body. Not, you might
yeah.
have someone with you. And I think this is the same of what you're saying. The
Yeah,
process
yeah,
of,
that's it.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do my first card. I changed my
Oh,
mind.
great. Good.
I was like,
As a Leo, I'm shocked. Amazing.
I changed my mind.
Go ahead, do yours.
Well, just the first one.
Card one, yeah.
Card one. So the first card that I have pulled the Page of Cups, the Page of Chalices.
Wow.
As you can see, this young, youthful looking figure is sitting there by themselves. A lot of alone time, clearly, the tarot wants us homos to be having.
Well, it's individuation, right? And it's
It's,
to use an almost biblical phrase in a positive way, it's a calling out. You're called out of your family. You're called out of your community. You're called out of the city, the system, whatever it is, to understand this about yourself. And it is
Mhm.
an anointing of a sort. As Rio says, it is a special thing. It's a blessing, but it is
Yeah.
individualized, at least again, as we're talking about it as a lifelong journey. Hopefully, we meet other like people and teachers and guides and friends and those support a support system. But ultimately, again, it's about the person, an individual.
Yeah, and I think precisely, and I think, the energy that's coming towards me as I am looking at this in terms of us fellow siblings is that you are deserving of love.
Yes.
I think that's what this felt like to me for some reason. That's just the energy that's coming over because I think that there's a lot of people who share our sexuality and other sexualities similar to us. Is that perhaps they're not deserving of love, of romantic love or all the other types of love that exists out there. And I think that's also a really important thing when it comes to love is that, it's not only eros, there's not eight, there are six other ways to describe love in amongst the Greeks, So it's also important to, yeah, just know that you are deserving of love. Also, just like high quality, loving love, It's also about, to me, not accepting less than you deserve. And I think that's quite beautiful with this card.
Can you say more about that, the not accepting less than you deserve?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I was just, there's a newsletter that just came in earlier today. It's by this woman called Jillian Turecki. She's like a love coach. And, she was talking about, and I think, I agree with this because that's also part of my coaching training, which is how important your environment is, right? For your nervous system, for your health, for your mental, your spiritual, your physical health, how important your environment is. And of course, your partner is a part of that environment. Of course, everybody is flawed. We are all flawed and we make mistakes. And so it's not about striving for perfection. And this is, my Virgo. I have a Virgo in both Mars and Venus.
Oh, wow.
So this is what I was going to say next. I could feel it creeping in, which is that I think it's still okay to have a certain expectation, in terms of who and what they are and what you would accept and what you wouldn't accept from a partner and being quite boundaried and clear about what that is. Another Brené Brown quote, which is clarity is kind and unclarity is unkind, just being super clear about what it is that you want and don't want, and then have the courage to make those right decisions that are for you because, yeah, your partner, even your friends, they're a part of your environment, and your environment does have a huge impact on your health.
Yeah, that's very well said. And the two things that came to mind, one is, RuPaul's closing of every Drag Race episode, right? If you don't love yourself, how the hell, you're going to love somebody else? Can I get an
Mm,
amen? And so
mm,
that self-love and then with that comes that self-confidence and
yeah.
understanding that you're deserving of love is really key. Um,
Mm,
yeah, that that is of fundamental importance. And then, the other thing that came to mind is there is a newness to it with the page.
mm.
Um, how does that strike you when we're asking the question of basically, is it all right to be gay and what the tarot thinks about that page aspect, the newness of it?
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting where my mind went when you ask that question. How do I phrase this? I think one of the beautiful things about being gay is that to a degree, compared to our straight friends, there is an expectation when it comes to heterosexuals. It's like the kids, the house, the job, the white picket fence.
Right.
We don't necessarily have that expectation, right?
Right.
Because we're gays. But what you also find is that, especially at least among some gay people, there is another mold that they follow, right? And people can think about that mold, what it may or may not be. And so I think that what's really important to remember amongst us homos, queers, gays, and days is that we have choice.
Yes.
We actually have a tremendous amount of liberty when it comes to choosing the kind of life that we want to live, because there's just certain expectations, unless you come from a specific family. But I think we have a lot more freedom and we have a lot more choice to choose than we think. And I also think that, as we are stepping into this next phase of human existence, um, we can create new ways of being gay in the world.
Yeah. I love that. And the thing I thought of first is even within whatever we want to call it, the gay community, there are constructs, there are expectations. And
Mm,
I love what you said about not even giving into them because it's almost, well, not almost, it is that we step out of one system or way of believing about ourselves and our place in the world when we discover or we accept, I think the two go hand in hand, that we're gay. It's easy then to step into another construct that the gay community has put up, whether that's,
mm,
hookup culture or it's supposed to be this way, or now we can get married, so you should, should can be
mm,
both a blessing and a curse. That's a whole other topic. But all to say, I love that. And I think that's a message to really convey to anyone listening is that you're not bound by anything. You're not,
mm,
you're not bound by any construct, whatever
mm,
that, and to really ask ourselves on a daily basis, why am I doing this? And
mm,
is it in integrity and wholeness for me or not? Um,
mm.
as it relates to being gay and as it relates to just being. So
Precisely as it relates to just being as well. I
that,
think that's really interesting. What's your second card?
ooh, let's see. So it is, I'm not going to look. Oh, wow. The Five of Pentacles. It's interesting. So the four and the five, right?
That
So
is interesting.
And the first thing that comes to mind is, yeah, this is how we feel often by society. It's pushed out of convention, pushed out of, a church, for example, as we see in the stained glass window. We feel crippled. We feel poor in the sense of we don't have the same opportunities and the same kindness shown to us maybe by the world. And yet, I don't read the Five of Pentacles as a negative card at all. It can be challenging, but life's
Hmm.
challenging. And being gay is challenging too. And yet, we've been chosen, shall we say, to rise above those challenges. And to me, it's like if we only would look up, God and spirit or whatever names we would want to give is here for us too. Created us
Mm,
if we want to go there, is inside of us. And the blessings that are available to straight humans are just as available to us. And so to me, that's a reminder that in those moments that it looks bleak, that there is support, there is security, it's about having that courage to go even beyond that five to get to the six and to continue the
mm,
rest of that journey.
yeah, because I suppose some people will feel the fives as like a loss, and I think you hit the nail on the head, and because I'm going to use the word resilience.
Hmm.
We have had to show extreme resilience to get to the freedom that at least many of us in the West, not all, have built over time. And it didn't happen just by itself. It came through struggle, it came to
Yes.
strife, but it has built resilience, and I think that resilience is really important.
And it's part of the gift that we have to share with the rest of the world. It really is.
Mm,
It really truly is. And I love that you use that word. And I want to just point out something, not to you, because you are aware, but to all of the viewers, anyone who comes across this. Think of the process that we went through to get these cards. Tor picked them randomly, intuitively. They weren't shuffled even that way. And to get the 4 and the 5 of the same suit, that's really special and really powerful.
I agree. And like you said, there was something about the second card in the pull, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wouldn't let me go. It's maybe the I don't want to say the more important message of the two, but maybe the thing to really focus on. I don't know how I
Mm.
would phrase it, but it certainly was stood out of the two.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, it's very understandable depending on the degree of strife, but sometimes strife and crisis can be a real opportunity for growth.
Yes.
Of course, it depends on the degree of the strife, but I think if as often as we can look at strife as an opportunity for growth and expansion and sort of change, I think that it's a much healthier way to look at the stuff that we are going through.
Yeah. Just for fun, I want to pull the top card of the deck as a clarifier, and it's the 4 of Swords.
The fours are clearly important, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is that mental card where, this looks chaotic and like strife and bleak and all the loaded words that could go with the image on a first impression. And yet there's a calm and a peace that's available to us, which how beautiful is that?
It is beautiful.
Yeah,
My second card. Ooh, that's interesting. You're going to like this.
I know I will.
We have the seven of coins. So clearly,
Wow.
clearly the tarot wants the gays to become rich.
There's abundance available, folks. Yes,
There's
that's true.
abundance and sharing and
Yeah.
caring available. How do you think about the seven of coins? What's your initial hit as you look at that card?
So I like your depiction of it because there's the two people there, which I think is really beautiful. Whether that's giving to a partner or sharing with the community or either one or something else. In the Smith Rider deck, it's someone resting on kind of a shovel or a tool, like looking at a bush full of, right, 7 pentacles that have grown over time. And it's a card of pause, it's a card of reflection, it's a card of gratitude, it's a card of like assessment. And I
Mm,
think all of those things can apply to what it is to be gay. And we've gotten 3 pentacles, and that's on purpose. And pentacles are foundational. Again, they're earth. They're the thing that, we're made of clay, right? Stardust and clay. And so there's a beautiful evocation and um, message there, I think for us. And we only have the one sword card so far that we've pulled in terms of this question, and it's a benevolent, peaceful card of setting the
mm,
mind at rest. And then that's really beautiful too. And then that Page of Cups, it's like stick with the feelings, stick with the heart. The heart space is really important, which again is why this figure is holding on to it.
mm. Yeah, and I think, what we've done now, and I think that I haven't watched too many of his videos, but there's a guy on YouTube who used to be like a Catholic, like he was going to become a Catholic priest. He's got young, and who's now making content about being gay and the journey of being gay and the church and so on and so forth. And I think what's also the thing with the Seven of Coins is that your story is interesting. And sharing your story might be useful to other people, even if you are still in the midst of it being quite crap. It still might be useful to others to hear that they're not alone. Because this is often what you hear when you run like a group workshop or whatever, is that actually the thing that most people take away from that is that they overhear other people's stories
Right.
and they don't feel alone. And so I think that if you are somebody who is listening to this and you think to yourself, like, what can I do? And what you can do is that you can either join like an LGBT charity, or you can make a YouTube video, or you can just do something with sharing your story, which might be useful to other people, and in on itself, that can be quite a healing experience. It's like I used to work when I was, how old was I? I don't know. I must have been like 17, 18 years old, maybe, or was I more in my 20s? Anyway, it was around that time, and I was working for an LGBT charity in Oslo, where I'm from originally, and they had like this help chat. And I remember
Hmm.
it was like Friday evening, and it was like going off. And I went over to the computer and I responded, and it was this young person who was really not feeling amazing about going to the cabin with his parents for the weekend because he felt like he didn't understand them. And through talking to him, I managed to support him in gaining some perspective and sort of talking him through that all of this was going to be okay. And I mean, that was just like the most rewarding thing. And so
Hmm.
sharing your story and helping other people understand that it's going to be okay is such a beautiful thing to do.
It is, and there's something that comes up in my work with writers a lot. It's almost that the more specific you are in putting yourself into a character or a story, the more universal it becomes. And I know that might seem counterintuitive, and yet from what you just said, Tor, it is part of the experience. It's why human beings have been telling stories since we learned to communicate, whether that's a cave drawing or a scroll, and now, a YouTube video or a blog or whatever form that it takes. And so you are special, you who are listening, and your story is important and it is valid. And whether your story had all kinds of trauma or strife to it that you overcame or on the midst of overcoming or don't know if you'll overcome, right?
Mm.
It's as important as the person who didn't, who had parents maybe that were really accepting and nourishing and, you know, belong to the gay lesbian parent group at a school or whatever your experience is. All of those things, your story is important. And sharing it and learning from others is part of the process of what it is to be a more full human.
So, just to throw a spinner in the works, I pulled a clarifying card, and
Ooh.
to some degree, I think it has thrown a spinner into our storyline, which is important. Sometimes you have to have a something that comes in the side door and go, Hello, I have pulled the moon.
Oh, love that.
What do you reckon?
So the first thing I think of with the moon is intuition, which I think goes into that sharing part.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I also think, the moon is a different kind of light. It illuminates
Mm,
differently than the sun. And so maybe if it doesn't seem like your story is hitting people in a certain way and people just kind of politely nod when you're sharing it or telling it, you don't know what impact that's going to have on them as it grows.
mm.
That's the first thing that comes to heart and mind.
Yeah, and it's something about embracing the mystery, and also, I mean, the gays to some degree will have some, like the energy of femininity will be somewhat higher within them. It's not always true, but it's true amongst many of us. And so
Right?
I think there's also something about not shying away from embracing that part of your personality as well. There's nothing wrong with that, you know? There's nothing wrong with having a stronger feminine energy within the body that you are inhabiting this time around. If anything, again, it's just another strength, of
Yeah.
that intuition and feeling and sensing, and is again a beautiful thing to be able to share with other people.
Yeah. And that I think within gay people, right, as we're talking about them collectively, there is more perhaps knowledge of what we would define as the masculine and the feminine, and perhaps more of a
Mm,
balance of it, perhaps, if that's the right word. And yes, embracing that is really important.
mm. I couldn't agree more. This has been so interesting and rewarding, and it's cool to use the tarot in this way. We will come back sometime soon and do some more questions. I think we stayed on this question for so long, but I think it was very much worth our time. So we will come back again and do another question, which surrounds this area of sexuality, of moving through the world in a different way. If you have a question, that you would like us to ask, you listener, if you have a question that you would like us to ask the tarot and to give our thoughts using the tarot in that way, we would actually love that. That would be so interesting. Justin, just to bring your thinking, like tie a nice bow, not knot. That's it, a bow. What are some of your key takeaways from what we did here today?
That being gay is beautiful, that being gay is a journey and it's a gift. And in those moments that seem bleak, there is hope, there is support, there is a courage we can take that we've been gifted with, perhaps in a way that our counterparts in the world haven't
Mm,
in that exact same way. And that's beautiful too, because they've been given things that we haven't, right? And that also is beautiful. And in that seeming distinction is a collective sameness and
mm,
oneness. Um, that's what comes to me. And I wouldn't have picked these cards intellectually, but intuitively, boy, they sure feel right and beautiful.
mm. Yeah, no, they absolutely do. What would I say is my reflections to tie a bow at the end of this gift that this is? I just want to comment on the experience in general. Is that it's just an interesting way to interact with a question which has sort of like a collective energy to it, and using, the tarot as the instrument that you and I both use a lot in our day to day, and also to share with others how they can use the tarot as a way of engaging in introspection, right? Because also that is another, we were talking about earlier about being gay and that there's many different ways of moving through the world as a gay person. To do that takes introspection, right? And so, if I could encourage anyone listening, it's to go on that journey of introspection. And you can, of course, use the tarot. There's many other tools and instruments and practices that you can do that, but just do something, to do contemplation, to have a mindful practice, just something that helps you to grow and learn as a human being moving through the earthly realm.
Yeah, I love that. And the last thing I would say, which just came to me, is in Kabbalistic terms, and I'm only using that as a qualifier, not because we're teaching Kabbalah per se, but the word actually means receiving. And that's something
Mm,
that all of us as humans are here to do, to receive the divine energy that's available to us, the gifts and the blessings that are constantly being poured into us. It's us that puts the barrier up and, oh, I'm not ready for that, or I refuse that, or I
mm,
want to do it my way, etc. And being gay is one of those things to receive. And so in those moments where it doesn't seem like it, it's a reminder that there's powers greater than us that are flowing through us that are pouring into us, and
mm.
that it is indeed a gift and something to share. And you are important, whoever you are that's listening. So, and Tor, you are important. So,
Thank you. You too. And it was such a pleasure to share this space with you. And until next time, thank you so much for listening, everybody. If you enjoyed this content, hit that like button, subscribe button, and we will see you here next time where we will continue exploring the tarot and other kinds of questions. Thank you so much for listening.